Hey buddy, my name is Mr. Sokol. I work with your dad, and I want to tell you a little something about what you're going to look at, which is the beginning of everything else mathematically for the rest of the time that you're taking math. And whether you like math or not, this is going to be part of your mathematical life from here on in. You know, you're going to be looking at those things that they were calling functions earlier, and they were just giving you tables, and they were saying, okay, magically look at this table and tell me what this is. And you said, I don't know. Well, now you're going to have a cool way to look at it because you're going to use what everybody calls the coordinate plane. And coordinates are just points that we're going to be putting in this graph area, and everything has names. And don't worry so much about names as much as you know what their purpose is in life, right? So you're going to be plotting points, or you're going to be given what are called ordered pairs, right? And they're going to tell you where this specific dot goes in this coordinate plane, this magical space, right? So this is an ordered pair. It says -3 and 4, and it has an x coordinate and a y coordinate. And the easiest way to remember that is that x comes before y, so the x is the first number and the y is the second number. And what it really tells you to do is move along what we call the axes. We have an x-axis, which is our horizontal axis. Right? So you move along this in the positive or negative direction. And then you have a y-axis, which is vertical. And you can't do anything unless you know about this center point right here. And it's called the origin. And it has an ordered pair of 0, 0. Right? We haven't gone in any direction. Right there, that's where everything starts. That's where you're counting when you're going to start plotting points. We're going to plot some points at the end of this. But right now, there's the origin. And some fancy people like to say, hey, what quadrant does this lie in? Your dad uses quadrants a lot. You should have him tell you a little bit about that because he has kids right in quadrants. And that's where it all comes from. We set it all up mathematically in quadrants, right? Quadrant 1 is that happy quadrant where everything that you usually see when you're seeing a graph of some data that's been taken, some information that's been taken, maybe it's poll numbers, you know, everything lies in here. But now mathematically we have to see if there's a line that's drawn, it may lie in some of these other quadrants. So now you're moving on to some different information just using equations. And while you think they look really silly and they don't mean anything right now, later on they're going to have some purpose, and you're going to be able to say, oh, well, it starts here in the second quadrant. Or maybe it starts in the third quadrant and moves into the first quadrant. And so you need to know a little bit about this. Everything is positive here. This is the happy quadrant. This is on the x-axis, it moves in the negative direction. You already know that because you know everything about the number line. And then we move upward in our y. If both our x and our y are negative, like this point over here, we're going to be graphing it in this area over here. And last but certainly not least, if we have a positive x value and a negative y value, we're going to be graphing it in this quadrant over here. But the most important thing you need to know, whether you memorize the quadrant numbers or not, is that is where all life begins, right there at the origin. So, moving on. Where do we go from here? We're going to graph some points. We're going to create a graph on our own, and we're going to label those points. So I'm going to do a little bit of erasing because we can't really plot if I have that silly thing right there. So I'm going to rewrite the word origin right here because we're not going to be graphing over here. So I'm going to write origin here. All right, let's graph a point. Here's how you do it. It's a really, really difficult thing. And you're going to laugh at me at how easy this really is. So go ahead and laugh at me. Everybody else does. Not a big deal. Here's our first coordinate pair that they want us to put a point on the graph and label. All right? So the x-coordinate is 0, and the y-coordinate is 3. So what it means is, along the x-axis, count over 0 spaces. Well, that's real simple to do. And then on the y-axis, the vertical axis, count up 3 spaces. So we'll count up 1, 2, 3. And we didn't have to move over on the x-axis, so we can just make a dot right here. Later on, you'll hear something about a y-intercept. When in the next chapter you get to slope-intercept form, that's what a y-intercept looks like. It's a point right there on the graph where that line crosses. But I'm going to label this as letter A. I'm also going to put the coordinate pair there just in case. Just in case. And then I'm going to move on to B. B says count backwards 2 spaces and down 1 space and make a dot. So -2, right? This is the negative side, this is the positive side, but you already know that. Up is usually positive and down is negative. So now I'm going to count back 2 spaces, left 2 spaces, 1, 2, and then down 1 space and make a dot. So I've gone 2 this way and 1 this way, and I make my dot. I'm going to get rid of those arrows because they're going to muck up the graph. There's our B, and we're going to put the coordinate pair in there, and now we've labeled this graph. And last but certainly not least is moving over 2 spaces to the right, that's our x-coordinate. Along the x-axis, we move +2, which is counting over 1, 2. And we're not moving up and down at all. We're staying right there on that line. So there it is. And we're going to label that C and put the coordinate pair on there. This is the easy part. This is, the beginning of being able to look at a bunch of dots on a graph and making some decisions about it. What does it look like? Is this just random stuff? To me right now, it looks pretty random. There's no flow in one specific direction, but that's how you start. Any questions? Please let me know.